Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Mr. Fix-It channel. Today I have a 2006, I believe, Suzuki S50 Boulevard. It's an 800 V-twin. It's been sitting a while, doesn't run, doesn't start. There's no battery in it, gas is old. Let's get into this one.
I was sitting out there in the shed one evening, not doing too much of nothing, just kind of staring at the wall.
So this bike has obviously been sitting outside. It's dirty, starting to develop a little bit of rust here and there. Mirror's broken, you know, that's 7 years bad luck. The story I got with this bike is it was his buddy's bike. It sat for a while, he got it running, then I believe he let it sit for a while, and then the carburetors got gummed up, you know, bad gas, whatever. Carburetors were pulled off, cleaned, reassembled, and I think he said the rear cylinder of the carburetor would just spew gas out of it continuously. A buddy helped him try to resolve that issue, and now there's no fuel getting to the rear cylinder, so it's only running on the front cylinder. And something with the ground wire to the battery. The first step here is, I'm going to get it up on the jack. We'll get a battery stuffed in the bottom of it because it lives down there. We'll crank on it, we'll see what happens. Pretty sure I'm going to have to drain the tank. The gas smells like turpentine, pretty disgusting. So let me get this up on a jack, we'll get a battery installed, we'll hit the button, and we'll see what we see. Alright, so I was digging around in the battery box and I found this. Should be the negative battery terminal. It's all taped up for some reason. It looks like there's no ring terminal on it. So let me get this tape off of here. We'll see what's going on inside that mess. Okay, so looks like the wire, like the ring terminal, came off the end maybe. I'm not sure exactly. But there was a butt connector installed onto this. Where the other half of the wire is, don't know. So in order to even crank this bike, we're going to have to fix this. So the wire runs in between here and bolts to the frame on the other side. And there's this secondary wire here. Have to find out where it goes, make sure that gets connected properly. Probably going to have to either replace this or make a new one. So let me get started on getting this fixed. We can get a battery in this thing, crank it, and find out whatever else is going on with this bike. Pretty sure we're pulling the carbs out. So over here for the positive side, this end has also been cut off and had a ring terminal, like a crimp terminal, installed. I don't like the look of that crimp. So I'm going to pull this off and I'm going to replace this end. That ground wire comes up and bolts to the frame, or actually it's the engine right there. And I think if I pull the wire loose, and there's also this wire here, which it goes behind the drive shaft, sneaks up in behind there, wraps across the fender, comes up, comes around, and loops back around, comes into this connector here. So it's kind of a way to travel to get to there. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this connector off, pull this wire out, and reroute it down so there's plenty enough length, and then reconnect it to this wire. And I should be able to get this tucked down into the battery box far enough and put a new ring terminal on it and get the battery connected without having to replace this wire. So I'm going to try to do that. We'll see what happens. If not, I got to replace the grounding system. Alright, so this turns out it's not long enough. So I'm going to take this up to the parts store, find a piece of wire that's a little bit longer, and get some ring terminals, and I'll remake this part, and we'll install it in there, get that battery in. Alright, got the new ground wire made up. I replaced the end on the positive side. We'll get that wire in there, get that battery hooked up, and we'll see when I turn the key what happens. Alright, well, I got the battery installed. Yeah, that was easy. Ha 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 ha. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is drain the old gas out of this. I got the pump pulled loose here. This line here looks like it's going up to that carburetor. And he was saying he was having a fuel leak problem. And it looks like it's actively leaking out of this line here. So the line might be bad. So let me get this line pulled off of here and we'll see what's going on with that. Okay, so I want to try to get the gas out of this thing. I'm going to pull the line coming from the tank going into the pump here. let's see, let me unplug the pump wiring. And then I got that clamp loose. Give this a little twist. Alright, I'm going to turn the fuel to reserve. Drain all this old fuel out. Yeah, I really had to go. Alright, I want to replace this fuel hose. I hope this wasn't his problem the whole time. Might be a little upset with himself if that was the case. Another piece of fuel line here. It's not going to fit over the new hose, so that's fun. Alright, got that on. We're going to have to shorten it a little bit. Yeah, I want to shorten it quite a bit. So let me grab some cutters. We'll cut that. So I'll go about there. That up onto that. I need the clamp. Put the clamp on this end of this hose. Okay, now I should be able to add some gas and try and fire this thing up, and we'll see what happens. Alright, let me turn this to reserve. I hear gas flowing. Pull the choke, key on. Well, it started up. We got fuel coming out somewhere. So it's leaking fuel from somewhere. I'll have to figure that out real quick. Alright, so this is the vent tube for the rear carburetor here, and gas is pouring out of it. Watch. So that means that float in that carburetor is either stuck open or damaged, or something's wrong with it. So I'm going to try tapping on the carburetor, see if that'll close that. And if that don't work, then that carburetor is going to have to come off. No. Well, tapping on it didn't help. I'm going to shut the fuel off and try to get it to start again with the fuel off, and try to run the gas that's in the system. So let me see if I can get it started again. So it's weird that it started up and ran right away, but now it won't even hit. So I need to figure out, it sounded like it was only running on one cylinder. It may have only been running on the back cylinder, and now it's flooded, and the front cylinder may not even be getting fuel. So let me do some poking around and try to figure out what's going on with that. Alright, so I got the air filter boot off of the top carburetor. I'm going to spray some brake clean into the upper carburetor and see if it'll hit off of that. Okay, so it's only running on the back carburetor. Adding fuel to the front carburetor makes it run on both. So there is a lack of fuel flow to the front carburetor, and the rear carburetor is overflowing. So it looks like both carburetors have got to come off of this. Alright, so pulling these two carburetors off, I took the coils out of the way, and I was getting this line that runs from this carb to that carburetor off. It was held on with a zip tie, but look at the state of that fuel line. So it's quite possible that this fuel line is collapsed internally, or a chunk of that rubber ended up into that carburetor and stopped that carburetor from working. So to get these carburetors out, it's kind of a pain. You got these cables here. You got the main throttle cable splits into two right here, goes to that carburetor, goes to that carburetor. And then there's another cable that runs from this carburetor back up to this carburetor, and that will adjust the idle for both carburetors. And this carburetor has its own little idle screw down in there, right there. And you got to sync these two together, and because they are remotely mounted from each other, it's kind of tricky to get these carbs out and back in and to sync them together. But just wanted to show you that. I already loosened the clamp for this, so this carburetor is about ready to come out. I just got to undo the choke cable and the throttle cable on this side, which is not too bad. Looks like you got to undo it right there. And well, like I said, there's the two cables and then the choke cable to undo. So let me get this carburetor out, and we'll work on getting that carburetor out. We'll take them over to the bench, we'll open them up, see what's going on inside. Alright, to get the choke cable out, you gotta get the 12mm wrench on this the best you can, and you gotta unscrew that, and then the choke cable comes out. Well, it's supposed to come out. Feels like it's stuck in there. Huh, that don't want to come out. I should just slide out of there. But it's not, because that's the story of my life. Oh boy, so let me screw around with that for 5 days. Alright, to get the throttle cable loose on this back carburetor, you have to loosen up the nut that holds this in the bracket, and you can just swing this thing around and get it out of the notch. And it's probably going to take both my hands, but you got to get it. You got to get that cable out through that notch there, and then that's how you get the throttle cable undone. All right, bear with me, guys. This bike is so hard to show you what's going on because everything is kind of packed in here. My experience with bikes that aren't Harleys, that try to look like Harleys, are usually the worst bikes to work on because everything is just kind of packed in there and jumbled around. And Harleys only have one carburetor, and they're behind a cover that looks like this, and it's really easy to get to. But when you get into these Japanese bikes that try to be Harleys, if you own one of these bikes and you don't know how to work on it, I suggest absolutely buying a manual, because this is not intuitive. You're not going to be like, okay, I'm going to walk up to this bike not knowing how to work on bikes and I'm going to fix it. Because everything is so hard to get to. There's intricate little ways you got to adjust these carburetors, and just getting them in and out of the bike can be very difficult. So don't get overwhelmed with it. Take your time, buy a manual, watch videos, because bikes that try to be Harleys, you're going to struggle with. They're the hardest bikes out there to work on. If you want a good, reliable old Japanese bike, go buy an old KZ. If you want a bike that looks like a Harley and you want to work on it yourself, or you don't want to pay a lot of money to have someone like me work on it, then spend the money and get a Harley, because the Harleys are way easier to work on than a bike from Japan that tries to be a Harley. Alright, once you got that throttle cable undone, now you can reach up here and undo this cable. You should be able to just pull it up, out, and get the cable through that slot like so, and then you can detach it from the carburetor. And trying to do this with one hand is very difficult, but you just got to get it out of that, and then you can pull this carburetor out. So all that effort just to get this one carburetor out, and then got to work on getting that carburetor out. Alright, so this choke was not even working on this carburetor. because the plunger is stuck. I cannot get that out of there. I'm gonna have to try some penetrating oil and maybe some heat or something to get that out of there, because I can't release the cable until I pull the plunger up out of there. I got that spring pulled up out of there. I'm gonna stick this little flat blade screwdriver in here and see if I can gently get in the slot there and twist that. Oh, there we go. So it's still in there. The cable came off, but at least I can take it over to the bench now and pull that the rest of the way out. Now getting this carburetor out is more the same, but it should be easier. So there's a clamp down here on the bottom. You got to undo that clamp. And hopefully the screw isn't stripped out like this one is. So get the clamp loose. You should be able to pull this out of the intake boot. Wiggle this up and out. And this one, like I said, it's more the same, but it's a lot easier because you can get it up here where you can work on it. So we've got to take this throttle cable off here. And then the choke cable over here, which it's a 14 on this one. And then it should just pull right out like that. And then this carburetor should be free to come out. And because this intake faces straight up, and it's a straight shot into that head, a little safety precaution there. Alright, so right away I see that this carburetor flip bowl has silicone on it. That is not the correct way to solve that issue, because silicone dissolves in gas, or at least the RTV silicones do. And this carburetor, I need to get that choke plunger the rest of the way out. There's that. Some corrosion in there that'll have to be cleaned out and addressed. That feels fine. Let's get into the bottom of this thing. Go grab my screwdriver. Alright, let's see what we got in here. There is some green crusties in there. Uh-oh, the float. I see issues with that. So the float it's a brass float and it has been imploded. So that's a pressed in pin. I gotta get something to press that pin out. Okay, the needle looks fine, but see what I'm saying about this float? It's imploded. See if we can get the pilot jet out. I'll have to get a different screwdriver. Okay, that came out easy. Main jet. Okay, everything looks alright there. Let's go ahead and pull the slide out. You can definitely tell there's been some shenanigans going on in this carburetor. I'm going to tap out the emulsion tube. A little bit of corrosion in there. Let's go ahead and pull off the power valve. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the needle seat. Of course, this screw is a little stripped. So you want to check this screen, make sure that's not plugged. Okay, that's about as disassembled as I want to get this carburetor. Okay, this screw right here is where you attach your synchro gauges to. So it's got a little seal on it, and then you thread your synchro attachment into there, and that's how you balance the carburetors. So I'm going to leave that out. We need to get the pilot screw out. Where is it? Okay, looks like the pilot screw is right there. Someone's already tried to drill that. So it's got a Welch plug covering it. And to get these out, you got to drill a little hole and thread a screwdriver in there and then try to pry it out. Like that. You can throw that away, and that gives you access to the pilot screw. And then you want to make sure you screw this in first and count the turns so that you can put it back where it was before you touched it. So I'm going to go half. It was only a half a turn. And we'll go ahead and take the pilot screw out. This is a pilot fuel screw. There should be a spring, a washer, and a little O-ring in here. So there's the pilot screw. Get your pair of tweezers, stick them in here. You can grab that spring. You should be able to grab the O-ring and washer the same way. Or you can just dump them out if they're loose. So there's the O-ring. But there was no washer behind the O-ring. So that leads me to believe that someone may have been in here before and just put that Welch plug back in. So the O-ring has been mangled by the spring, and that, of course, we counted half a turn. It should be anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 turns out in that ballpark. So it being a half a turn, someone's probably messed with that. Like I said, put that Welch plug back in there because there should have been a washer behind that O-ring, and the O-ring is mangled, so we'll need to repair that. So this is, for all purposes, completely disassembled. I'm going to stick that in the ultrasonic cleaner along with its float bowl, and we'll get that cleaned up. Take all the parts from this carburetor, put them in this tin. Set those aside. Now disassemble the other carburetor. This is one of those hose clamps that had the thumb screw on it, and the thumb screw is broke off, so there's really not much to grab a hold of. So you just gotta do what you gotta do. So this piece of fuel line is going to be getting replaced. I guess while I'm taking this apart, I should get the ultrasonic cleaner heated up. Of course, it takes quite a long time to heat that thing up, so it'll be a minute. Or 50. Okay, this is that cable I was talking about that sinks the idle between the two. So I'm going to take this off, and the end of that cable is frayed pretty bad. I noticed the throttle cable to the back carburetor was frayed pretty bad too. That's going to cause some issues when I go to sync the carburetors. Set that aside. Go ahead and take the top apart first. Do not use silicone RTV as a carburetor gasket. That's bad. Don't do that. So these carburetors are completely different. This one has a plastic float in it. Get this pilot jet out. Main jet. Need a different screwdriver. Good grief, that's in there. So we just unscrew it this way. See, is this also an 8? No, it looks like a 6. This is where the slide needle, because this carburetor sits at an angle, the slide needle comes to this point. So we'll pull that out so we can clean in there, and we can get that emulsion tube out. There's that guy. The needle seat out. Yep, so there's some of that rubber hose right there. There's rubber hose all packed up inside here. Okay, let's get the power valve out. I guess you call it a power valve. I don't know what else to call it on bikes, but I call it a power valve. Take this thing off. Hang on to this cover because it's spring loaded and it'll go flying. There's that carburetor fully disassembled, and we'll put it and its float bowl into the ultrasonic cleaner and we'll get these cleaned up. Alright, so since this thing takes 5 years and 7 weeks to heat up, I think I am going to partake in a little motorcycle ride because there's rain coming and that thing takes forever. So I'm going to go ride my bike for a little bit, let that thing heat up. I'll get those carbs cleaned up, and then when they're all cleaned up, come back, we'll assemble them, assess any problems there may be with any of them. Probably gonna have to get a carb kit because this one carburetor was glued together with silicone. So we'll have to go from there. So I'll be back. Alright, so it's been, I don't know, a week, 10 days maybe. Got some parts in. I noticed this carburetor here, even after the ultrasonic cleaning, there is still some debris in this port. This is my torch tip cleaner. Just trying to get it through there. I think the smallest one I got is too big for that hole, so that's not going to work. So another thing I got is these tiny drill bits. They go up in 0.5 millimeter increments. So I'm going to try one of these smaller ones. Okay, that unplugged a hole, but I'm going to go up in drill sizes until I know that hole is completely clean. It was a 0.35, this was a 0.4. See if the 0.45 will go in there. No. So 0.4. I don't know how much of this information is going to be relevant. So I don't know how much of this I'm going to put in the video, but I got that passageway there cleaned out. Want to run some compressed air through that and blow through. I believe this is part of the idle circuit. There's also some jets, the air jets for the bleed in the front here. You want to make sure those are clear, which those are usually not plugged because that's on the filter side. I mean, that looks like a jet. I don't know why that's not removable. Okay, that's all cleaned out. Let's go ahead and install the new gasket. Yep, that looks right. That's a good fit. I just got these off eBay. I just looked up this bike and carburetor kits, and they had several different options. They had some that came with jets and screws, and there was a few different variants in which kits. So I just got what I needed, which was basically the float bolt gaskets. And these actually came with new needles and seats and a couple other small O-rings, which I am going to use the new needle and seat out of this. So let's compare those. Looks to be correct. And then compare the needle. That looks to be right. So we'll go ahead and install that. Just a little bit of lube on the O-ring to help it install without tearing. Okay, that's a good fit. Gotta find the correct screw. And this is the bad part about when you have to wait for parts and you got this stuff tore apart on your bench for so long, is remembering how everything goes back together. So if you're going to take carburetors like this apart and you're going to wait a week to get your new parts in, go ahead and put the carburetors back together. And that way, when the parts come in, you just take the carburetor back apart and put it back together. That way you don't get confused where parts go. Okay, and don't over tighten anything on a carburetor, because that's going to make problems in the future if you ever have to take this back apart. Or problems for a guy like me that'll be in here later. Okay, let's go ahead and install main jet. See, it looks like I need it's an 8. That's an 8mm. And then pilot jet, and then we have the emulsion tube. It's keyed, so there's a slot in that and then a tab in there, so you gotta line that up. Best way to install this is to get you a pick or a punch or something that'll fit in there, and then you can hold this like this. You can look down in there and see the key and the keyway, and you can line this guy up like so. Now that's in, and then there's the screw that holds it in place. That's not an 8, is it a 7? That's a 6. Oh, that just broke. Alright, so I can't express this more to when you're tightening things down inside a carburetor, to not over tighten them. And what had happened here is when I was tightening down the little screw that holds the emulsion tube in place, it just broke off. Now, I've tightened thousands of screws, and I know what it feels like when I'm over tightening something to the point that it's going to break. And this, it never even got tight. So whether I caused this damage, which I doubt, but it's possible, but more than likely the last person that was in here over tightened that, and this screw is very fragile. So I'm just trying to work the threaded portion of that screw out. So that is a problem, and I'm going to have to figure out a solution as to what I'm going to do here about this. So if I can figure out what thread that is, I might be able to replace this with a different bolt. But give me some time, let me figure this out. Alright, so side project is done. Hopefully it fits and does the thing. It's not perfect, but it should work. Let's go ahead and put this part in, and hopefully I don't have to wait a week for another part to come in. Like it never happened. Now the other thing is the slide needle has to go down into that, so we got to make sure that goes all the way down. Yep, it does. We're good. Alright. Okay, we're finished putting this back together. Gosh. Alright, so that was an hour of my life I'll never get back, but who's really counting anyway? So let's get this assembled here. Always got to make sure you drop the part down in the carburetor before you install it. That's step one. The float height should be the same, but you probably want to check and make sure that that's accurate. And you do that by measuring this surface to this surface, and you want to hold the carburetor to a point to where it just stops on the needle, and you would measure from there to there. Okay, I think that's everything that goes in the bottom of this. We'll go ahead and close this up. Alright, I know these are the right screws because they have gasket sealer on them. I always go in an X pattern when tightening these bowl screws so everything tightens down evenly. I'm not sure that it's real necessary, but it's just force of habit, you know. You get to doing things so much. Okay, let's install the power valve. That's a strange looking bug. Get out of here. Okay, there's a spring goes on top of it, and then the cap. One of these is a bevel-headed screw. I guess that's for alignment purposes. So we'll put that screw in the beveled hole. Okay, the pilot screw. It's been long enough, I don't remember. I think the O-ring and washer was missing on this one. It goes in there. So I'll have to find an O-ring and a washer for that. Alright, the glories of being a hoarder. I have all kinds of spare carburetor parts laying around. So there's the washer. And there's the O-ring. A little bit of debris. Get that out of there. And we can screw this guy in. And I'll probably have to revert back to the previous video to see how many turns out this was. Normally I think, if I remember right, one of them was screwed in too far, but they're usually about 2.5 turns out. So that's where we're going to go, is 2.5 turns. So screw it all the way in until it stops. Don't tighten it. Just screw it until it stops. Half, 1, half, 2, half. And I'm not going to replace that Welch plug because I'm probably going to be doing a little bit of tuning to this when the bike's running. So I'm just going to leave that off of there. So now we can put the slide back in. And the spring. And the top. And you just got to make sure that this rubber diaphragm is seated all the way around. So before you call this done, you need to make sure that this diaphragm is actually seated. And there's a way you can test this. There's this port on top here. If you blow compressed air in there, the slide should lift. So if I blow right here, and that's how you test to make sure that that slide's working correctly. Alright, this carburetor's done. Move on to the other carburetor now. I did get a new float because this one was all crushed. Oh yeah, this one had the stuck choke plunger, so I need to clean all the corrosion off of this and out of the choke plunger hole. So this I can basically just wipe off with my fingers. As far as getting down in that hole, I have these little scrub bore brushes, so I can get in here and knock the corrosion off of that. And this should slide in and out of here easily. Which it does. Okay, so that's good. Alright, I got the pilot screw installed. The float bolt and everything's in. Let's see. Let's do the slide. On these diaphragms, there's a little ear on that corresponds with the carburetor body. So line that up. Make sure that needle feeds down into the emulsion tube, which can be kind of tricky sometimes. Usually they just slide right in, but these carburetors, for some reason, are being a little difficult. There we go. Line that ear up. Seat that in the groove. Big spring and the top. Let's see, we have one odd screw here, and it's rather stripped out, but I don't have any other screws at this moment, so we'll just put this back in and we'll hope that we're not the ones that works on this next. So your cables are installed as so. The throttle cable comes in on this side, the synchro cable comes in on this side, the choke comes in on that side, and this sits in here like this. I got to get a fuel line attached and run it down here. I did get a new piece of fuel line for this, and get that carburetor installed. Just got to nestle it down into its boot, tighten up the clamp, and get the other carburetor installed. Okay, so the trick here to installing the carburetors on this bike is, first you have to have the hands of a child, which rules out my huge meat mittens. And second is you have to learn at least 3 new curse words. But I got them in there. Alright, so I've been messing around with this for a little bit, trying to find the best way to install these carburetors. And what I found is there is this bracket up here that holds the gas tank in. It's got 4 screws in it, and there's a screw on the side that kind of holds the air box. And then this throttle cable has these 2 brackets here. Going like, oops, okay. One screws down right there. The other one screws down right there. And if you take all this apart, you got plenty of room in the throttle cable. So before you put this carburetor in, you can pull what a pain in the ass. That gives you enough slack so that you can pull all these cables under this cross member, and you can hook everything up to the carburetor and get some things adjusted, and then you can set the carburetors into their intake boots. I think that's the best way to do this. So you should be able to do your idle sync cable adjustment and get your preliminary throttle cable sync adjustments pretty close, and then you can stick these on and then you can sync the carbs. So this bike it's not easy to work on. The best way I can explain how to do this is you want to tighten up the cable adjusters, the throttle cable adjusters. You want to adjust those so that when you twist the throttle, they both open at the exact same time. Now this synchronizer cable here is for the idle adjustment. So that screw right there, you want to set this screw down here. You want to set this screw here so that this pin just touches this. Once you get that, now you're going to adjust it here until this pin just touches, and you'll see that the throttle's closed. So when you adjust this, You can see that cable moving, and that'll pull the throttle open for the idle. Now this cable has a bit of tension in it, so when you idle this back down, you kind of want to pull down on that to get both carburetors back if there's a little bit of stiction in that cable there. So once you get it set up like this, go ahead and install the carburetors, and then you can hook your synchro gauges up, and then you can fine-tune the sync of these two carburetors. Alright, I'm just letting the bike warm up here, and once it gets warmed up, I'll hook up the synchro gauges and we'll synchronize the carburetors. Seems to be running pretty good. So it's actually pretty close to where it's at now. Alright, synchro gauge is hooked up. I took that toolbox off over there to access that screw. Got that hose in that side. I got this hose in that side. We can see that this is front carb, this is rear carb. You can see the front carb is drawing way more vacuum, so it's closed more than the rear carb. If I give it just a little bit of throttle, you see how that picks up? It starts matching the back one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. Oops, I unplugged something there. I'm going to go right here to the throttle cable right there, and I'm going to start turning it out. And we'll watch the gauge, and as I turn this out, those numbers should get closer together. So now we're synced. I got to tighten down that lock nut right there. Tighten that guy down. It's very hard to get a wrench in here to tighten that. Basically impossible to do. So we'll do that off camera, get that nut tight, and then after you tighten that nut, you got to check again to make sure you're still in sync. So there you go, synced. All right, while you have your synchronizer gauge hooked up, go ahead and start adjusting your idle mixture screws and try to get the highest vacuum you can get. So I'm going to start turning this. Hear the engine picking up and the vacuum increased. You're going to do that till you get the highest vacuum you can achieve. If the vacuum starts dropping back off, you went too far. So right about there, and I'm going to adjust the other side. Too much in, coming back out. All right, that sounds good. Nice crisp throttle response, everything synced and in tune. Now you can unhook your gauges, put them screws back in, and put everything back together, and you're done. Alright guys, that's all there is to it. Bike's a little complicated, a little convoluted, but if you stick to it, you can get her done. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and don't be afraid to fix it. Thanks for watching.